having its team rapidly fluctuate. There were several trains of thoughts at the company on how to proceed without ditching the console itself. One was to shift out of the home market altogether, instead market the GameWave towards restaurants, who could install it in their venues where patrons could play the various games while they waited for the food, similar to the MTN systems and their Trivial Pursuit-like games that are found at many bars and restaurant chains across North America. The other, however, was to focus even harder at the family entertainment market and specifically target a group that seemed to be ignored by the gaming industry: Christian families, particularly in the United States Bible Belt. When approached about either of these ideas, Venkatacharya was apparently ambivalent to both.
How did I get so many
However,
points so
Richard
fast?
Fast, one of Zappit's founders, apparently felt that the Bible Belt option was worth pursuing more, though the restaurant system idea would still be worth pursuing, but for now just as a side project. The first order of business towards rebranding the GameWave as a Christian edutainment system was the quick release of a new version of the 4 Degrees Pack-In game. Shortly after the original release of the GameWave system, and with it 4 Degrees Volume 1, a Volume 2 hit store shelves as well. Now, hardly a year after that, there is 4 Degrees, the Ark of Trivia, Bible Edition. Around this time, there was a good deal of coverage in the news about Jack Thompson, an anti-video game activist and Florida attorney who claimed video games promoted sex and violence in youth, going so far as to claim that violent video games promoted school shootings. Despite drawing much ire from many due to his statements and being disbarred permanently from the Supreme Court of Florida in 2008 due to inappropriate conduct, such as making false statements during hearings, at the time many in the Christian right in the U.S. did agree with Thompson in his views. As such, several at Zappit felt that they could poise the GameWave as a more wholesome alternative to the more expensive consoles. Then, they could sell it directly to this audience at retailers such as Lifeway Christian stores. Perhaps the icing on the metaphorical cake here would be the introduction of the first, and ultimately only, licensed GameWave game. This would be VeggieTales Veg Out Family Tournament. VeggieTales, with its highly popular cartoon series aimed at Christian youth, seemed like a natural fit here. Negotiations, which took place sometime around early 2007, went smoothly, and the game would even time with the upcoming 2008 VeggieTales God Made You Special live tour. In addition, VeggieTales official outlets would promote the GameWave, and they would even start carrying GameWave products on their official online store. Set to release in December 2007, VeggieTales Veg Out Family Tournament would be a bit more complex than any other game on the GameWave. It would be less of a basic puzzle or trivia game, and be more inspired by the likes of Mario Party. It even was given a dedicated press release. Zappit Games was clearly proud of this title, going so far as to replace 4 Degrees Volume 1 with it as a new pack-in title for the GameWave. Things were looking like they were finally about to go well for Zappit Games. A new licensed pack-in game would be a great way to entice their new target audience, while several Ontario restaurants were expressing interest in bringing in GameWaves as a cheaper alternative to MTN systems, assuming of course that Zappit would begin to actually make GameWaves with that in mind. But along with this, as 2008 approached, new smart devices, such as the iPhone, were preparing to enter the market, presenting a potential new marketplace for their games. Zappit Games seemed to be on the brink of something good, and the VeggieTales game seemed to be the title that would help them reach that. It is rather odd, then, that this would be the last completely original title to be ever published by Zappit. $25 million. That's how much had been invested into Zappit Games by 2009. And by then, it was almost all gone. Early that year, Zappit Games would release their first mobile game, a port of 4 Degrees Volume 1 for both iPhones and BlackBerry devices, but that would ultimately be their only mobile title. Zappit had decided against entering the restaurant entertainment business as well, even though the GameWave had failed to catch on with Christian audiences, even with the help of VeggieTales. Harry Venkatacharya had promised to change Zappit Games and Nitrix. He promised big things and allowed for the company to completely refocus the console and even their game development plans as a whole, but none of this had really been his doing. According to Anthony Gusson, who's director of business development at Nitrix,
soon after we engaged him as a consultant, he gave himself the title of managing director. He was never managing director, and ultimately he produced nothing for us. We had an amicable parting of ways in 2009 or 2010.
Despite Venkatacharya's seemingly great reputation among business people in the Toronto area, he had done surprisingly little at Nitric and Zappit, besides greenlighting a few things and issuing some loans. No new games were released after VeggieTales for the Game Wave, though that was not for lack of trying. It was pretty obvious by 2008 that the Game Wave was not going to be a big thing, but it still seemed like a lovable underdog to the talented programmers and designers who'd worked on it. Mike Montanaro said at the time,
"It was a pet project as I saw the potential for it with sales channels. I had been successful in turning the talent with CPT Kids in the past and wanted to see how far I could take this with it. It seemed like fun, plus the team was a bunch of good guys looking to do something different. I like this kind of stuff. This job was not about the money. Most of the stuff I did for them, I never billed them for."
Shortly after Venkatacharya's departure, Zappit's funding dried up. The few stores that stocked the Game Wave stopped carrying it, and indeed some even wound up sitting in warehouses in the US, destined to eventually be sold off as new old stock nearly a decade later. The writing was on the wall for Zappit Games. Despite having much funding pumped into them, they had never had enough funds or direction for a proper ad campaign or the killer app that any successful game platform desperately needs. Around 2010, the company quietly shut down, with those left going to find new, likely higher-paying jobs, assuming that they hadn't done so already. The Game Wave website would go offline in 2011, and from there, it seemed that instead of ushering a new type of game console, Zappit Games and their Canadian-developed game system were truly destined to fade into obscurity. But then, in 2013, something odd happened. An arrest warrant was issued for Hari Venkatacharya. The charge? Committing millions of dollars worth of fraud. Before and during his tenure as CEO of Zappit Games, Venkatacharya was known to lend money to businesses, and indeed even make out loans to companies he was involved with. Often, these would have a handling fee attached to them, which could often cost thousands of dollars. However, after leaving Zappit Games and Nitric Limited in 2009, Venkatacharya's interests shifted towards what he called big business. He claimed to have become connected to a funding group in Dubai with connections to the royal family of the United Arab Emirates, and apparently they would be willing to give loans of up to $250 million to promising companies and projects in North America. Though many may find this shady just hearing about it, Venkatacharya had an established reputation as a trustworthy businessman. With these new massive loans came something called a due diligence fee. In one example, in May 2011, an entrepreneur named Anthony Paolucci was seeking to build a series of soccer fields north of Toronto and turned to Venkatacharya for funding. Upon being informed that he could be granted a $235 million loan for his project from the mysterious Middle Eastern funding group, Venkatacharya instructed Paolucci that, in order for everything to go through, he would have to wire him a due diligence fee of over $77,000. Paolucci agreed, and then waited. Weeks and weeks would go by. Paolucci and Venkatacharya communicated frequently by email, with Venkatacharya reassuring him that the loan would arrive sometime soon. But then, in July 2011, Paolucci received an email from Venkatacharya stating that the mysterious funding group had decided not to fund any projects for the next 6 months, and that, as a result, he would be receiving a refund on his due diligence fee in the upcoming weeks. It never arrived. Paolucci was not alone. A fraud investigation was started by the Fraud Bureau of the Peel Region Police, and it was discovered that Venkatacharya had defrauded over 40 companies worldwide, 25 of which were in the Toronto area alone. It is confirmed that he made away with over $3 million, though that amount is potentially higher. And worst of all, for those at Zappit Games and Nitric Limited, some of these fraudulent dealings were in the works while he was at those companies. In 2013, a warrant was issued for Venkatacharya's arrest. He received a prison sentence in Ontario that following year. As for the Game Wave, it may not have sold well, and may be but a footnote in gaming history, but those behind it did truly want to try something different, even if what that difference was ended up changing a few times, and led to them being taken on a wild ride in the process. However, success or not, this day the Game Wave remains the only true game console to have ever come from the pinnacle.
Oh no. Game Wave is a console that was intended to do something different. And it did, even if it didn't succeed at doing so. To put it lightly, the Game Wave failed to make waves. But I've seen some pin the failure of the Game Wave purely on the fraudulent actions of Hari Bhattacharya and how those tainted the reputation of listeners. But is it truly all his fault? Is Zappa Games merely just target an audience or audiences that had no interest in video games? Or is it something else? That's for you to decide. This is The Art of Failure.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Top Hat Gaming Man here, creator of content on the cornucopia of consoles. At the latest edition of E3, the